I'm Simon Levin. I'm professor of ecology and evolutionary biology at Princeton University. I'm a member of the external advisory board for SESYNC. I agreed to join the external advisory board despite a lot of conflicting obligations that I have, because I just think the mission of SESYNC is too important to ignore. I've become convinced that there's no way for us to solve the environmental problems we face without considering the relationship between the environmental systems and the social and economic systems with which they interact, including both the influences of those systems and especially the humans, but also the fact that achieving success in addressing those problems is embedded within a decision framework that involves the actions that individuals take, the actions that institutions take, the actions that governments take, and one has to understand factors like the behavior of humans and why they do what they do and how to change attitudes and actions. So, as we learned at this meeting from listening to Jane Lubchenco, the administrator to NOAA, the classical view of science, at least as funded by the National Science Foundation, is basic science with the hope that applications will flow from this. But we know, not only from the current environmental problems, but from the history of science in many fields, that there are feedbacks, that that great basic science arises often from the stimulation of applied problems, the need to find solutions. This leads to new kinds of science. So I think we're at a juncture where one has to couple basic science with applied science and with use-inspired science, as Jane described it. So one has to create the feedback loop that comes back to the basic science and gives it new directions. And an example I think that's relevant to environmental science now are new applications of game theory, which sounds like a very abstract subject, but it's inspired by finding ways to get people to work together and to resolve problems where there are disputes. Environmental disputes are prime examples of that. One of the themes that I would emphasize was implicit in the last remarks that I made, namely where most of the problems that we're dealing with are problems that William Forster Lloyd and later Garrett Hardin called problems of the commons, problems that Elinor Ostrom, the late Elinor Ostrom, addressed in dealing with small-scale fisheries. Individuals carry out actions for their own purposes, they have their own agendas, but these exist within frameworks in which other individuals are affected by their actions, and in which there are emergent problems of the commons that affect everybody. It's in everybody's interest to get solutions to these problems of the commons. The most broad scale has to do with climate change and other global environmental problems, which sounds like a pretty tall order to address, than it is. But as Lynn Ostrom emphasized, the right way to approach problems like global climate change are through polycentric governance, in which one operates on much smaller scales and tries to get agreements among the various parties and then builds up from there. And this can also cascade down to even smaller scales. And there are lots of examples. For example, Lynn's work on small-scale fisheries, the lobster gangs of Maine, the Tribunal de las Aguas of Valencia, which has resolved disputes in Europe having to do with irrigation for a millennium, and many other examples that I think are addressable problems and problems that can be translated into solutions. And not only are these important problems, not only are they, in my view, the central problems confronting us, namely, how do we get everybody to cooperate in finding solutions to global problems that affect us all, but they also raise fundamental behavioral questions having to do with why individuals do what they do and what will motivate them to do other things, fundamental ecological problems, fundamental evolutionary problems, and fundamental synthetic and mathematical problems. So I think these are perfect class of problems ought to be at the center of what SESYNC is doing.